Oh, hi friends. Well, obviously I'm not Renee. There's a little monster inside of her that is currently making her very sick. So as a good partner, I'm tagging in. I play a lot of video games and I could lose hours in them. I really enjoy multiplayer games and so does my 5-year-old son Johnny. But don't be fooled by his cuteness, he ain't no noob. Sometimes I'm worried that other players will realise that they just got totally smashed by a 5-year-old and his 39-year-old dad, then they get embarrassed and won't want to play us again. And Johnny's too young for most multiplayer games, but we found a game that's pretty good called Plants vs Zombies. It's exactly what you think it is. You are either a plant shooting zombies or a zombie shooting at plants. We play online with Johnny's Uncle Tim from time to time, but most other players are random. Johnny can't hear the other players and nor can he talk to them, well except for Uncle Tim of course. But with other players though, he communicates with cute little emojis like smiley faces and cactuses and cowboy hats, that kind of thing. And he has these auto texts that he can share with other players like a good job or follow me, that kind of thing. Most people in this game and other multiplayer games are super keen to win, but more than anything they just love playing the game and are way more into like the fun of games than actually winning. But there are, however, those other people who just only want to win, and they can be abusive to weaker or younger players, and they'll just like drop out of games if they feel like they're going to lose because winning is everything. And winning is way more important to them than how they treat others in the game. They are the worst to play with in multiplayer games, and they might even be the worst kind of person to have in a church. One of the most unique things about this particular game is in the common area there's a memorial plaque to one of the game developers that died during the making of the game. And if you go to the plaque and interact with it, it will open up a cool animation that says, "In loving memory of," and it's got the person's name, and then it goes on to list all the other 50 people that made the game. Every day Johnny goes there and he wants me to read all the 50 plus names, which I don't. But he's most fascinated that there is one name above all others for no other reason but they died. This week I'm reading one of the books written about Jesus called the Gospel of John, and in the 5th chapter we pick up on an interaction between Jesus and some religious leaders. The religious leaders had such difficulty believing the things that Jesus was saying about himself, mostly because what Jesus was saying challenged who they were to the people and who they were to God. Jesus was calling into being something we now call a new covenant between God the Father and all of humanity. And this new covenant was a complete game changer. The religious leaders had become accustomed to all that came with being at the top, being number one, which Jesus was telling them he had no interest in. To the people, the religious leaders were special. They could do things for them that they couldn't do for themselves, like priests would talk to God on their behalf. And Jesus said that they could talk to God through him now, making religious leaders redundant. It was that kind of thing between the religious leaders and Jesus that caused so much conflict. But the religious leaders had mastered the art of religion. They were specialists and elite at religion. They were superstars though, they were household names, they were the who's who of the Middle East. They were on every red carpet occasion, they were at every A-list party, and they had their own groupies and stuff. Jesus though wanted none of that. In fact, he outrightly rejects it, yet people still flock to him. As his notoriety grew, he became more infamous with the religious leaders. The underlying problem here is not what Jesus was saying. There were many radical people in Jesus' day preaching all kind of blasphemy, but as long as they submitted to the religious leaders or the religious political structure of the time, well, all was okay. Again, Jesus had no interest in doing that because that meant Jesus would need to seek their approval over God's approval for everything he said and everything he did. So in chapter 5 of the Gospel of John, and in some of the verses just before chapter 5, we read about several miracles that are just straight out mind-blowing. But one of those miracles was done on a special day, and the religious law was you couldn't work on a special day, and a miracle was considered work. I mean, that's crazy, right? Now, this got the religious leaders all riled up, but Jesus was having none of it. In verse 41, your approval means nothing to me. In verse 43, I came to represent the Father. You refuse to welcome me. You readily accept others who only represent themselves. I mean, here's the real clincher for me in verse 44. No wonder you can't believe, for you gladly honor each other, but don't care about the honor that comes from God alone. See, religious leaders were the best players of the religious game of the day, but they had lost the reason for playing the game in the first place. They had made their life and other people's lives all about them winning, being on top, and weaker players were cast out, and anyone who jeopardized their position were seen as competitors. Now, I tell Johnny some golden rules about playing video games. If it makes you feel angry or sad, it's time to stop playing. If you need to cheat to win, you've already lost, and it's a game, it's not real life. Some of the golden rules for that can be applied here as well when you talk about this scripture verse. I mean, aim to be the best version of you and don't compare yourself to other people is a pretty good lesson in life. But games are to be played and life is to be lived and lived to its fullest, but not at someone else's expense. And most importantly, players of any game are not more important than the maker, no matter how good you are at playing it. The religious leaders lost the reason why they played the faith game. Winning and being on top was more important to them than anything else, including God's will. So let's take a little note out of Johnny's book and check in with the creator of the game of life every day. And remember, Jesus is the only one worthy of being number one. And I hope you're having a great week, and Renee will be with you hopefully again tomorrow. But in the meantime, be good, be loving, and be kind.